we were talking about the ESA 1.5, then the Scenario Explorer to explore all the scenarios, so you have a chance of looking at the underlying resource. But at the same time, you probably realize there is a lot of scenarios in there. In total, to be precise, 416 from 13 models, including 4 large-scale multi-model studies. So for the specific question that you may have as a stakeholder at hand, and we of course realize there are many different use cases here in the room, the question is which are the most suitable ones to look at, if there are any, for you guys. If you look for comparison at the scenario resource compiled for AR5, it's about 3 times as large, given that the focus is not just on these very low 1.5 and 2 degree scenarios. So there's 1,200 scenarios from 30 frameworks. So AR6 will probably come out in this order of magnitude, maybe more. We'll see. So what we realized, there is a need really to getting your head around this scenario space, find your way to navigate within that space and identify scenarios that might be suitable. There are, and this is what we learned in the last stakeholder process, and some of you who have been involved then may recognize these scenario users that were developed as part of the breakout groups roughly a year ago at PIC. There are different user needs, and so we look back at what you told us at the time, and essentially identified 3 meta use cases for how one may want to find scenarios that are suitable for specific use. On the one hand, identifying scenarios based on qualitative, what we would call meta information. So qualification, a type of scenario. So for instance, what type of policy design was explored in this scenario? Are there any specific recommendations or any specific assumptions on technologies such as CDR being available or not being available in a given scenario? The second use case is really trying to do filtering on the results. For example, you're looking for scenarios that have less nuclear energy deployment than we have today, or that have limited carbon dioxide removal, or that have a certain final energy demand below a certain threshold. And then the third use case is doing essentially the same type of filtering based on input assumptions. So one specific one could be we have had this very rapid cost reduction in specific renewable technologies, and you want to actually figure out which scenarios are in line with current developments of solar PV cost declines, and give me a sense of what these are, and then I can further narrow down my choice based on this assumption. You also gave us at the last stakeholder workshop already a hunch what type of information you may want to you may want to have in these domains. So what you want to do filtering on. This is non-comprehensive, but to just give you a sense of what we took back. So on the one hand, certain characteristics, more structural information on the type of model being employed. So does this model supply the sectoral resolution that I would need for my analysis? Is there enough granularity in the analysis, for example? Are certain novel technologies represented in this model so that I can look at their potential contribution under climate policy? And so we try to match that with available structured information. Unfortunately, the answer to most of these is there are resources where for a larger suite of models and scenarios, such information is available, but it's unfortunately mostly partly available. So it is always a bit of an effort if one wants to really do such a filtering on a larger set, such as the ESA 1.5 scenario set. Then you may find some information for a part of the models, but not necessarily for all of them. And of course, if you then start doing filtering, you kind of implicitly exclude a lot, because the information you're filtering on is simply not available. That's also not very useful, right? So we need to be kind of pragmatic how to proceed with this. And then let's quickly move to the more quantitative information, scenario assumptions. So what type of policy targets were included? I already mentioned technology, cost, and performance was one of the indicators I think that we heard more than once in this context. And then in terms of results, peak and neutrality year, for example, was a key indicator that Elma presented, and where actually 1.5 and 2 degree pathways are quite different. Here the situation is, there are some which are generally on which the information looks pretty good, such as the energy mixes or evolution of certain commodity prices and carbon prices, for example. But otherwise it's also patchy, and that means we, in terms of developing such a tool, we have to probably make compromises, because what type of information can be collected is a question of process that we have at hand, also in motivating modeling teams to give us this information for such a tool. Come back to this later. So then we have done a more systematic comparison of many of these indicators, including also what is available. So this is just the naming of the indicator. The spreadsheet doesn't fit here. We are for sure happy to share this with those of you who are interested, to give us more specific feedback. We've tried to include here also quite a bit of information that you gave us last time. Then there's also, what is readily available. So you see some boxes are ticked for AR5 and ESA 1.5 as the largest kind of compilations of data sets. Then there's also, it depends on where you're pulling this information from. Some is direct IAM reporting, some are derived indicators from this reporting, and then sometimes one needs to go into the scenario protocols of the underlying studies or collect it from the census fact sheets. That brings me already towards the end of the presentation. Jonas is going to show you a prototype that he implemented. The prototype at the moment focuses on this qualitative meta type information. So it doesn't allow you, for the moment, filtering on quantitative input or output assumptions, but these meta indicators. It is connected to the ESA 1.5 scenario sample as probably the most relevant and recently available one. We'll probably continue this development, trying also to include this quantitative scenario indicators, and for that it would be super useful to get feedback. After Jonas's presentation, there's one slide with a few suggestions of where we would appreciate feedback, but you have this free form feedback form, so share with us whatever you think or whatever comes to mind. With that, over to Jonas.
2 minutes.
Oh, I guess I have to. So this is how it looks like. So basically down here I have a list of all the scenarios available, and up here I have some filters, and basically what you can see up here is just all the available models that have been used for these scenarios, and you have the numbers, how many times they have been used. So let's say again I'm interested in Elma's research, so I choose the so I'm selecting these, and like now I have only 51 scenarios out of the total 400, and maybe let's say not interested in Elma's but Bauer's rather, and then only maybe the one that have the word full in the scenario description. So I can quite quickly filter down from the list of 400s only to the ones I'm interested in. And then if I want more information, I can find more information here for the model, for example. So I have here a short description, what we saw already in the Explorer, and also for the scenarios sometimes. In this case, we have some information here. Then of course you have some options. You can do another sorting, whatever you might like. in this interface. You have some options whether you would hide the empty options. So if I select the remind magpie, I only have the remaining options visible. Yeah, as we said, or as Volker said, these are only the meta indicators, and to the right we have some more ideas at the moment how we could filter then the quantitative methods, the values. So for example, here we have a histogram where you then would be able to select only like the values starting at 1.5 until 3 something, but as you can see, like the legend is still missing, the x's are missing, so this is really work in progress. And here this is one idea where you would could compare the input to the output values, for example. So here would be 100%, this is 97%, this is 102% on one axis, and on the other axis you would have the absolute value of the this in this cases peak warming, but this is just a suggestion for you how we could deal then with these values. Again, you could then brush the data here, so you can only see the ones you're interested in. And also we would add the functionality, so you could add your own facet choosing from the long list of metadata we have available. And as you can see up here in gray at the moment, so the idea would be, if you selected your scenarios, you click up here on this button and you're taken to the Explorer where you only have these scenarios selected in your workspace. Yeah, so that's in 2 minutes.
Excellent.